social channels anymore. I used to, but now it's just LinkedIn.
Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got with me Gary Cookson, and Gary has got a new book coming out. The book is called The Squeezed Middle: How to Succeed in the Critical Role of Middle Manager. Open brackets, middle management matters, close brackets. Gary, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you?
Hi Tim, hello everybody, lovely to be here. People can find me primarily on LinkedIn. I'm easily track downable. I'm Gary Cookson, or they can go on my website, which is epichr.co.uk.
And I must admit, reading the book, I've not seen a book about middle management before, because it's kind of like kicked into touch. This is your third book, isn't it?
It is, yes, yeah. But the first on this topic.
Yeah, and it was really interesting, having been a middle manager. And there's like nothing about middle management out there. So what was your motivation and inspiration for writing a book about middle management?
Well, a few things. My other book's on slightly different, but what I would call adjacent topics. So all about the modern world of work. And what I realized in writing the second one, which is primarily on hybrid working, is that the key people who make that work, or not, as the case may be, are the people in the middle of the organization, middle managers. And there wasn't much that really examined their role, not just to do with how hybrid works, but per se. Like you say, there isn't much out there covering that particular topic. And they are denigrated to a degree. They're often seen as the first port of call for budget cuts and delayering exercises, and that's lazy thinking. I think somebody needs to speak up for middle managers. They play a really valuable role, as I explore in the book, and nobody had really examined how to make that work, so I wanted to be one of the first to do that.
Because I've read lots of books about leadership, and they're always about strategy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, but then you go into your first line leadership role, and actually, it's nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Because you're executing someone else's strategy, aren't you? In a way.
Yeah.
So you call the middle manager the critical role, yet the term middle management is often seen as a negative. Why has this role become the whipping boy of the corporate world?
There's a few reasons for that. I mean, number one, the label middle manager suggests that it's a stepping stone to something else, like that strategy role that you just mentioned, that it's somewhere that isn't a destination in and of itself, that it isn't necessarily a valuable role that somebody could aim for or to do, but it's something that you pass through on your way to somewhere bigger, somewhere better. I don't think that's the reality of working life, and it shouldn't be either, but it's a very well established perception of middle managers that it is not necessarily a valuable role. And the other reason for that is the value comes from things that you don't see. And it's sense making in an organization. Like you say, if you come into a management role, you are applying somebody else's strategy, but the people who make sense of that are the middle management layers. They're the people who translate those corporate goals from high level, vague concepts into something real that their frontline teams can do. They're also the people who are highly networked in organizations, who see more than the people at the top are able to see. The people at the front line are able to see. They are connected to virtually everybody else in the organization. They are the people who build relationships. They're the people who get work done. They're the people who resolve conflict, who solve problems without those things spilling over and causing problems at the top of the organization. So a lot of the work they do is invisible. And because it's invisible, people tend to view them as not having much value. But one of the best ways to establish the value of a middle manager is to get rid of them and see what happens then, or rather see what doesn't happen.
So we've seen a massive shift towards hybrid and remote work. How has this especially changed the squeeze for managers who can no longer rely on management by walking around?
Yeah, there's a lot of this in this book, and I've covered it to a degree in my second book as well. Management used to be, when it was all entirely face-to-face, a very sensory experience. You'd see things, you'd hear things. Management isn't about that anymore. A lot of management now is done through a screen. Middle management, to a degree, has always been like that, done through a screen, because you're not on the front line doing stuff. Lots of what you need to do as a middle manager is managing through proxies or through a screen or through other people doing things. And hybrid work really brings that home. It places a magnifying glass on that. It doesn't really change what a middle manager does, but it means that it's more important for a middle manager to have a good handle on how to be a good middle manager, because those things really matter now to disperse teams, people working asynchronously, that work can be done remotely, work can be done through a screen, work can be done in lots of different ways. And a middle manager is key to holding all that together and helping teams to adapt to that, bringing them with them, encouraging them to experiment, encouraging them to replan and reprocess work. All of that is a key middle management responsibility. And it comes to the fore now, not just with hybrid work, but with things like artificial intelligence coming into much more into our daily working lives. Work is changing, and the people who should be at the forefront of how that's changing, why it's changing, and what it means for everybody are the middle managers.
Yeah, there was a guy who worked for me, and he used to send me a message which was knock knock. And what that meant was, he said, in the old days, I would have walked past your office, knocked on the door, and said, "Can I have 5 minutes?"
Yeah.
And it was that time when he wanted like to have 5 minutes. So he used to send me a message, was knock knock, which meant that I then would immediately video message, and we'd have that conversation as if it took place in the office.
Yeah. And we need more of that, because unless people consciously think about the need to do that, then when you're working remotely, you will often forget that. Despite best intentions. And sometimes you need even like a visual prompt or a reminder that comes on your screens to do that knock knock type of conversation, because that's what really matters. Connection, the emotional proximity that comes from that connection, is something that we have to work consciously to create in remote and hybrid working environments. And middle managers, because of the breadth of people they'll have reporting to them, should be able to do that with all their reports, but get them doing it with each other as well. So they're creating the right climate and culture in their teams to do that.
You talk about managers being the bridge between senior strategy and frontline execution. What does that communication usually, where does that communication usually break down, and how can a manager fix it without losing their mind?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and one which many organizations have not really got right. And I might well be one of the first people to publish a book recently on middle management, but during my research, I've examined journal articles, magazine articles, questioning the way that middle managers do exactly those things from the 1970s. So this is a debate that's been rumbling on for all of my lifetime, and for many other people listening to this as well. It's a problem that is never really been solved in organizations. Communication is the thing you mentioned there. Communication in organizations is very usually top down. And that usually involves the senior leadership team and other people at the top of the organization trying to set direction for the organization, trying to create momentum and urgency about the way people work, without always realizing the way that things get done on the front line, on the ground in the organization. And they need people who can translate that, because sometimes those concepts can be too high level, too vague, and might not make much sense. People need to know what they need to do today, tomorrow, not necessarily what they're going to be doing in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
So senior leaders need people like middle managers working with them to translate that, to make sense of it, and also to push back a little bit, to challenge in an appropriate way whether things are right for the organization, whether things are aligned, whether things fit culturally with the organization, and to feed back some things that their frontline teams are saying to them in a way that makes sense to the senior leaders. So this communication role, call it a conduit, the middle managers are, it goes two ways. They've got to take the directives from the top and put them into a language that the people on the front line understand and can do something with. They've also got to take the emotions that come from the front line and translate that into something that makes sense to the strategic leaders at the top. So there's an awful lot of quiet work that middle managers do to process things, things to make sure that the emotion is right, that the strategy is right, that everything is aligned and put together. It's a really, really valuable role. And again, you see the value of it when nobody does it, because then you see mismatch, misalignment between the strategy and the front line, and conflict then ensues. So it's a really valuable role, a communication role.
So Andrew, probably about my knock knock comment, says Andrew's a very regular watcher. Andrew Slessor basically says, "Good morning, knock knock. Who's there?" So thank you, Andrew. Middle managers often do a huge amount of emotional labor supporting teams through change and burnout. How does your book suggest they protect their own mental health while carrying everyone else's?
Yeah, that's a really important role, because we don't often protect or support middle managers the way that we might do for first line managers, and certainly the way we would do for senior leaders. Again, it's seen as a stepping stone role. So one of the first things I think organizations could do is clearly define what a middle manager is in the organization. And by that, I mean, don't just look at their functional responsibilities. If I'm a middle manager in, say, an IT role, then yes, my job description is going to have many IT specific tasks on it. But there are certain responsibilities and accountabilities that come with the layer of middle managers that need to be explicitly called out, named, put into job descriptions, so that it is seen. It isn't that invisible work. It isn't the emotional labor. Let's actually name it. Let's label it. Let's make it explicit. And that then means that everybody in the organization knows what a middle manager should be doing, not just their functional responsibilities, but their responsibilities of being a middle manager. So naming it is one thing, because it brings it above the surface. So there's one. The other is building a community of practice amongst middle managers so that they're not feeling on their own. Management in general, middle management particularly, can often feel like a really isolating position to be in. You feel like you're the only person wrestling with all the issues that you've got going on. That's not really the truth in organizations, but what we don't do is encourage people at that layer, or indeed any layer, to work together to share problems, to solve problems, to look at the way things are done, and to help each other doing that. So having a community of practice is really helpful as well. We can also look at what middle managers are doing day to day. And if a middle manager, and this was my experience when I was a middle manager, is spending a lot of time writing reports, looking at data, feeding those reports up through the organization. If we're spending too much time doing that, then that's not really allowing the middle manager to have that space to think, time to do the really valuable things that a middle manager does that I explore in the book. So we need to examine, how can we reduce that burden? How can we automate some of that work? How can we make that work smarter so that it doesn't stop happening, but it frees up space for the more emotional labor, more invisible work that we know has to happen? So there are some structural changes. There are some system related changes there. I would also have some developmental changes too, that there is a very clear pathway to being a middle manager that might be not that stepping stone, but the end result of somebody's career journey, so that we know who further down the organization is showing the right attributes to be a middle manager, what we can build in them, what we can help them to grow towards, and have a pathway to that. We have pathways to senior leadership. We have pathways to first line management. We don't often have pathways to be in that middle layer, and we should.
I'll come to your point in a moment, Andrew, but many organizations try to lean out by removing middle layers. What's the actual cost to a company when they over squeeze or remove this middle glue?
Well, the cost comes from the stuff that middle managers do that is invisible, not getting done. So at the moment, what they are doing is carrying the culture in organizations. They are doing that sense making, they are aligning things, they are making sure the organizational system works really, really well. And if they're not there to do that, that work doesn't get done and things drift out of alignment. They are also the enablers of the right experience across teams and making sure that is relatively consistent across the different teams. And again, without somebody doing that, they will start to become misaligned over time. They are also the early warning system in organizations, spotting problems that the senior leaders won't see, spotting problems that the front line can't see, and then resolving those due to the breadth of relationships they have across the organization. So they're doing all of those things as well, absorbing the pressure from both directions, filtering things out so that senior teams only get what's relevant to them and frontline teams only get what's relevant to them. And again, if that's not done, chaos could well ensue. So the best work that middle manager does is preventative work, de-escalating issues before they become visible. And if you remove that layer, those things will become visible. Those things will become real problems for the organization.
So Andrew asked a question: has the middle management become a lost art and company structures are becoming overpopulated and causes confusion?
Hello, Andrew. That's a great question. And I agree with you. I think middle management has become a lost art because we've lost sight of what a middle manager really is. We stack their job descriptions full of those functional responsibilities that I mentioned before. So you're quite right. There is an art to being a middle manager. In one of the case studies in the book, we look at a social housing organization that really defined well what a middle manager is all about. They looked at the unique responsibilities that come with being a middle manager. They looked at how middle managers work together. They created that community of practice. They created those developmental pathways, and they made sure that that layer within the structure was properly resourced, properly organized, and really clear. So there wasn't that confusion. There wasn't that overpopulation. It was a very well-defined tier. So you're right, Andrew, that is a thing, but there are ways through it.
With AI taking over many administrative tasks, some say middle management is dead. You argue the opposite. Why is the human element of the middle manager more important now than ever?
Because what a middle manager does are uniquely human skills, and AI can replicate and do a better job on lots and lots of things, particularly transactional things, particularly things that are taking up a lot of middle managers' time at the moment, like performance reporting, writing reports, looking at data. Those are the things that AI is uniquely placed to do and should be doing. And that then creates space and time for middle managers to do the more human aspects of their role, coaching people, mentoring people, solving problems, resolving conflict, helping teams to work better together. That type of stuff, AI can't do as well as middle managers at the moment, at least. So AI is an opportunity not to get rid of middle managers, but to use it to create space for middle managers to do what they are really magnificent at, which is the human aspects of work, helping people to make sense of what's going on, helping people to change the way they work. That's what a middle manager can do. That at the moment is not what AI can do.
So many people are promoted because they're great doers, not because they're great leaders. What is the very first thing an accidental manager should read in your book?
Well, that's a really tricky thing to say, because I also always think books should be read sequentially from start to finish. But for those people who want to dip in and out of it, I think there's stuff in there about finding your people and connecting with people. I said before that middle management is a really isolating place to be, and it is if you let it be the case. And there's plenty of case studies and examples in the book which talk about people finding mentors, finding coaches, joining communities of practice, not only internally, but outside their organization as well. And that is the first thing that I would encourage any new manager or any new middle manager to do. Find people around you who can be your personal learning network or your personal board of directors, who can hold you accountable for doing things, who can help you with other things, and who you can help in turn. And that is one of the very first things that I think a new middle manager should do.
It's easy to manage a team if you have support from above. How does a middle manager effectively manage up when their own boss is the one applying the pressure?
Yeah, that's tricky, because sometimes They need to have credibility within the organization without having the authority to override what a senior manager might do. And that's a very common thing too. I think middle managers should be values based in the way they make decisions, the way they look at things, and that will enable them to build that credibility through consistency, fairness. People will follow those who they trust, and that means that they will build that trust with people further down the organization on the front line if they're operating in a values based way, not just their personal values but in line with the organizational values. And we would hope that there is some alignment between those things. That will enable them to create clarity in messy situations. It will be able to enable them to show their working, show their thinking, to work out loud, to bring people with them. And that kind of stuff is useful for managing upwards in the organization as well. They wouldn't necessarily then be caught in the crossfire at senior level. They will be able to identify clearly what's negotiable, what isn't, communicate that honestly. They'll be able to anchor their decisions and their communication in purpose and value rather than trying to curry favor and preference with senior leaders. They will avoid carrying messages uncritically. They are interpreting things rather than just relaying things. They're putting their own unique spin on things. And I think senior leaders would respect that if the senior leader themselves is willing to listen to that.
Gary, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, The Squeezed Middle, How to Succeed in the Critical Role of Middle Manager. So if I wanted to buy a copy of it, where can I get one from?
You can get one from Amazon. It's easily searchable on Amazon, or the publisher is De Gruyter Brill. And you'll find there, if you search my name and De Gruyter Brill or my name and Amazon, you'll be able to find easily.
And it's out on March the 16th, 2026.
That's right.
Excellent. Gary, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. I really enjoyed it, and I recommend, if anyone is a first line manager or middle manager, you probably get more out of that than reading some book about strategy. So that's my view on it, my personal opinion.